Imagine for a second, like you were tasked with uploading the actual working mechanics of an entire culture into the digital age.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a huge undertaking.
Right. I mean, how would you even begin to gather that kind of data?
Uh,
Because you can't just, scrape the internet for text files.
No, definitely not. Text doesn't capture the nuance.
Exactly. Like, how do you digitize the precise way a grandmother calibrates a localized home remedy, and then in the very same breath, capture the exact rhetorical cadence that a legendary movie star used to unify a fractured political landscape?
It's almost impossible to quantify things like that.
Yeah, because those aren't just data points, right? They're complex, living systems. It feels like an impossible archiving task, but there's an institution attempting to do exactly that, and they're structuring it all into a single high-stakes gathering.
It really is an incredibly ambitious project, and it is happening right now. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are analyzing a strategic event brief for tomorrow, which is Saturday, May 23, 2026. The Potti Sriramulu Telugu University, which we'll just refer to as PSTU today, is celebrating its first Foundation Day at the Bamuru campus in Rajamahendravaram.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because looking at this agenda, I mean, it initially reads like a bizarre collision of completely unrelated academic disciplines.
It really does look disjointed on paper.
Yeah, you have Vice Chancellor Acharya D. Muniratnam Naidu and the chief guest, MLA Garantla Bachaya Chowdhury,
Yeah.
presiding over a day built on two very distinct pillars. On one side, you have this highly technical indigenous folk medicine.
Right, the scientific aspect.
And then on the other side, you have the political and cultural identity forged by a mid-century cinematic icon. And get this, the ultimate goal is to feed the synthesis of these discussions into cutting-edge artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I know it seems crazy at first glance, but there is actually a very rigid underlying logic here.
Really? How so?
Well, we have to look at the mechanics of institutional survival. For a university that is tasked with preserving a regional identity, a foundation day like this isn't just a party, it's a strategic maneuver.
Ah, okay. So it's not just academics reading papers.
Exactly. They are building a framework, they are actively utilizing the past to validate the present, and then, using that present data to train the future.
Okay, that makes sense. And we see this survival tactic first applied to the physical body, right?
Yeah.
Because the initial focus of the day is explicitly categorized as folk medicine scientific,
Yes, the morning session.
right? And the stated objective there is bridging ancient indigenous wisdom with modern scientific validation. So they have Dr. G.V. Purnachand and Dr. Chirumamilla Murali Manohar leading a deep dive into clinical Ayurveda.
Right, which is a fascinating translation of knowledge.
It is, but the mechanism they are discussing, how to transition hyperlocal folk remedies into standardized medical practice. I mean, from a purely clinical standpoint, that sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. The variables are massive.
Yeah. A local remedy often relies on like a specific soil composition or a very specific season, and usually an informal oral tradition of dosing. So how exactly are they proposing to standardize all of that into a replicable medical framework?
Well, that is the exact friction point they're attempting to solve. Translating a deeply contextual, hyperlocal botanical practice into a standardized clinical protocol, it requires a massive amount of verifiable data.
Right, you need baselines.
Exactly. You cannot just run a modern clinical trial on an oral tradition, right? You need historical baselines. And that is the precise mechanism Dr. D. Ranganayakulu, the former director of the TTD Museum, brings to the table.
Oh, I see. So he's not just there to tell folklore.
No, not at all. He is providing hard epigraphical and archaeological context.
Right, he's bringing physical artifacts and ancient inscriptions to back it up.
Exactly. When you look at temple inscriptions or, say, centuries-old palm leaf manuscripts that detail specific botanical regimens, you are basically looking at early forms of longitudinal data.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. If Dr. Ranganayakulu can present an inscription that proves a specific herbal compound has been administered for a specific ailment continuously for, say, 500 years across a specific region.
That gives you a verifiable physical footprint.
Precisely. The modern clinical doctors, like Dr. Purnachand, can then use that centuries-long baseline to isolate the active compounds and actually begin standardizing the dosage. It is treating the historical survival of the remedy as a form of long-term field testing.
I follow the logic there. That's brilliant, actually. The physical inscription is basically the baseline data for the clinical trial. But here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly where I have to look at this agenda with a heavy dose of skepticism.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, because sitting right alongside the clinical doctors and the museum archaeologists, you have Acharya CVB Subramanyam, and his session connects this human health research to astrological and planetary cycles.
Yes, the cosmic element.
Right, and rounding that out, you have Acharya and Bhaktavatsala Reddy and Dr. Parasiddhi Sivashankar analyzing how this preserves the quote-unquote living traditions
Yeah.
of the Telugu people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand mapping botanical compounds, that's chemistry, but how does analyzing a planetary cycle fit into rigorous clinical science? I mean, are we not just diluting a medical framework by forcing modern cosmology and local rituals to sit at the exact same table as pharmacology?
I get the skepticism, but what's fascinating here is that we really have to strip away the modern, slightly mystical connotations that we, usually attach to the word astrology. We have to look at what it functionally represented in Indigenous history. What we are essentially talking about chronobiology.
Chronobiology.
Yeah, in ancient agricultural and medical systems, planetary and lunar cycles were the most reliable macro clocks available to them. I mean, they didn't have digital calendars to track micro-seasonal shifts.
Right, wow. So you're saying the planetary cycles are essentially just ancient tracking mechanisms for environmental changes?
Precisely. Think about it. If a specific Ayurvedic botanical requires harvesting when its sap flow is at its absolute highest, or, when the local monsoon humidity hits a very specific threshold.
They needed a way to track that.
Right. Ancient practitioners mapped those optimal windows to lunar or planetary movements. It was a highly structured, reliable way of recording environmental data.
That completely changes the context.
Yeah, so when Acharya CVB Subramanyam integrates planetary cycles into this discussion, he is likely advocating for the preservation of that chronobiological context.
Right, because you can't fully standardize the local medicine if you just strip away the environmental timing in which it was engineered to operate.
Exactly. You'd be losing half the instructions.
Okay, that clarifies the mechanics significantly for me.
Yeah.
It is not about planetary magic at all. It is about reading the environmental metadata that surrounds the plant.
Exactly.
And that ties directly into what Dr. Reddy and Dr. Sivashankar are discussing with living traditions, right? The living tradition isn't just a cultural quirk.
No, it's highly functional.
It is the psychosomatic and social synchronization of a community actively adapting to its environment. If you extract the chemical from the plant, but you completely ignore the environmental and social context in which it has been safely administered for centuries, you are losing half the medical data.
That is the exact argument PSTU is making here. They are redefining scientific validation to actually include the holistic, longitudinal survival of a cultural practice.
Which provides a really seamless through line to the next phase of the day.
Yeah.
Because preserving the physical health and environmental synchronization of a population is really only half the battle.
Right, you need the cultural side, too.
Yeah, you also have to preserve their social cohesion and their political agency. So the agenda pivots from the medicine of the physical body to the medicine of the body politic. The afternoon focuses entirely on the 103rd birth anniversary of the university's founder, Dr. Nandamuri Taraka Ramarao.
Universally known as NTR.
Right.
And this is where the concept of strategic institutional survival becomes highly visible. We are looking at a session titled The Actor Sovereign.
Now, obviously, anyone familiar with Telugu culture or this university's history already knows NTR's trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
He went from dominating the silver screen to literally taking the chief minister's office.
A massive cultural shift.
Yeah. And we know he established PSTU to safeguard the language, and he is widely viewed as the architect of Telugu self-respect. But what this session is digging into isn't just a basic historical retrospective of his electoral victories.
No, it's much more analytical than that.
Right. The agenda points to a rigorous breakdown of exactly how he engineered that transition. You have Bora Saimahav and S.V. Ramarao scheduled to dissect the art of dialogue, and specifically how cinema operated as a vehicle for cultural and social migration.
And that phrase, cultural and social migration, is absolutely critical here. Cinema, in this specific context, wasn't functioning merely as entertainment or escapism.
No.
No, it was a highly effective mechanism to move an entire population's social consciousness.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Sri G.V. Ramana from the AP Drama Academy is specifically presenting on the dramaturgy of NTR's political career.
Yes.
And just to be clear to you, the listener, the source material here isn't auditing his political policies or his administrative legacy, right? It is analyzing his career purely through the lens of performance, communication, and leadership mechanics.
Exactly. It's an objective look at his methods.
Right. And honestly, applying the framework of dramaturgy to statecraft is a brilliant analytical approach. We often talk about politicians being performative, but dramaturgy implies a structured, intentional mastery of theatrical elements.
The science of performance.
Yeah. It's almost like a modern-day superhero stepping off the movie screen to actually run the city.
Huh.
So how exactly did an actor's mastery of film dialogue translate into real-world social migration?
Well, this raises an important question about the fundamental nature of political communication, especially in a region that is deeply rooted in oral traditions, epics, and mythological storytelling.
Okay.
When we talk about dramaturgy, we are talking about the deliberate structuring of a narrative. It's the pacing, the physical posture, the specific rhetorical cadences used to evoke a very specific emotional response.
Which is very different from standard politics.
Exactly. Standard political communication relies on policy white papers and dense bureaucratic language, which, frankly, often alienates the general population.
It creates a massive barrier to entry for the average voter. They just tune out.
Exactly. But an actor sovereign like NTR, he bypassed those traditional bureaucratic gatekeepers entirely.
Right.
By mastering the dramaturgy of mythological and historical figures on screen for decades, he had already established this profound pre-existing psychological rapport with the masses.
Oh, that makes so much sense. He taught them the visual and rhetorical language of leadership in the theater first.
Yes. So when he stepped into the actual political arena, he didn't adopt the dry language of a bureaucrat. He weaponized that familiar cinematic dramaturgy.
He used the shared mythic reality of the cinema to forge a shared political reality. That's incredible. When he spoke, the audience already knew the emotional cues.
They felt it instinctively.
Right. They recognized the tone of righteous indignation or protective authority because they had literally consumed it in theaters for years.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a masterclass in exploiting established neural pathways in a population.
That's a great way to put it.
He didn't have to explain his ideology from scratch. He just had to hit the right dramatic beat, and the cultural resonance did all the heavy lifting.
And that concept, cultural resonance, that is the exact bridge we need to understand the final and honestly most structurally complex phase of this foundation day.
Right, the technology aspect.
Yes. We have mapped the deep roots of physical survival through Ayurvedic chronobiology, and we have mapped the mechanics of social survival through political dramaturgy.
Both huge topics.
But the critical question the university is asking now is about digital continuity. How do these hyper-complex, deeply human systems actually survive the relentless march of 21st century technology?
And this is where the agenda pivots from historical analysis to future architecture. The final focus shifts to the university's role in the digital age, led by Registrar Dr. Srinivasa Rao.
Right.
And here is the mechanism that really caught my attention. This entire Foundation Day isn't just a celebratory symposium.
No, not at all.
The live discussions, the friction over the archaeological data, the analysis of NTR's rhetorical pacing, all of it is actually acting as a primary, real-time data source for something called the Digital Prism Project.
Yes.
They're deliberately capturing the real-time intersection of medicine, history, and film.
It is a phenomenal feat of data engineering. The institution is utilizing a framework they call the SOPHI strategy. Now, we really need to understand the mechanics of what a strategy like this actually does in the context of artificial intelligence.
Because it's not just making a recording.
Exactly. They are not merely recording the audio of Bora Madhav talking about the art of dialogue just to upload it to a dusty archive.
Right, because an audio file doesn't train an AI to think. It just gives it a file to transcribe. It's flat.
Correct. The SOCI strategy implies an active, structured framework of ontology mapping.
Ontology mapping.
Yeah. As these experts speak, the system is designed to capture the semantic weight and the contextual cross-references of all these concepts. It is converting the nuance of the live event into high-density metadata.
Wow.
They are using the high-level dialogue of this specific day as a curated data set to train AI models to actually comprehend the intricate cultural architecture of what they call deep Telugu.
So what does this all mean for the AI itself? Let me try to frame it mechanically. Standard large language models, like the ones most of us interact with daily, they learn language somewhat like a person reading a massive flat dictionary, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
They learn to predict the next token, the next word, based on statistical probability. They know the definition of the words, but they don't know the graph.
Exactly. There's no soul to it.
Right. But what the Digital Prism Project is doing is more like teaching an actor the subtext of a script.
Yeah.
They are forcing the AI architecture to recognize that when a specific Telugu phrase is generated, it isn't just a statistical output.
No, it carries weight.
It carries the historical weight of a 1960s film trope, or, it connects to a 12th century inscription about monsoon health practices. They are actively moving the AI from token prediction to actual cultural comprehension.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute necessity of that subtextual training becomes glaringly obvious.
How so?
Well, think about it. The vast majority of foundational AI models operating today are trained on generalized, heavily Western-centric data sets.
Right, the data reflects Silicon Valley mostly.
Exactly. Their baseline understanding of the world is shaped by the English-speaking internet. So when those generalized models attempt to process regional languages or non-Western concepts, they rely on literal translation. They flatten the data.
Because the standard Western AI model has absolutely no framework for something like chronobiology.
None at all.
It doesn't know that a local folk remedy is intrinsically tied to lunar cycles. And it certainly doesn't understand that a regional political movement was fundamentally anchored in the dramatic pacing of a mid-century movie star.
Right. It just misses the point entirely.
It just processes the raw text and strips away that deep Telugu context entirely.
And in the realm of machine learning, if the system cannot process your cultural context, your culture basically becomes functionally invisible to the technology that will dictate the future.
Which is terrifying.
It is. That is cultural erasure at an algorithmic level. So the SOPHI strategy is a preemptive architectural defense against that exact erasure.
That makes perfect sense.
By feeding the AI this highly curated, cross-disciplinary collision of archaeological survival and performative dramaturgy, PSTU is trying to ensure that the intelligent systems of tomorrow won't just, output Telugu characters on a screen.
Right.
They will actually operate within the localized cultural logic of the Telugu people.
It fundamentally changes how we view this whole event in Rajamahendravaram. I mean, it isn't a birthday party for a university.
Not at all.
It is a data harvesting operation for a culture's soul.
Yeah.
When you step back and look at the trajectory of the agenda, it is staggering.
It really is.
You start the morning meticulously examining physical artifacts to validate ancient chronobiology. You spend the afternoon dissecting how a sovereign actor weaponized cinematic mythos to migrate a society's political consciousness.
Yeah.
And then by the time the sun sets, all that dense human complexity is actively being structured into metadata to train a culturally fluent digital consciousness.
It is a rigorous blueprint for institutional relevance. It proves that to protect a heritage, you cannot just scan old documents into a hard drive.
Right, that's not enough anymore.
No, you have to digitize the intersections, the friction between the science, the art, and the politics that actually makes a culture breathe.
Which brings this entire exercise right to the doorstep of you, the listener. Because while this specific Foundation Day is deeply rooted in the Telugu identity, the mechanics of what PSTU is doing forces a mirror onto all of us.
Absolutely.
As the world rapidly migrates into these massive generalized AI architectures, how will the mechanics of your own culture be preserved?
That's the real question.
How will your local histories, or the specific rhetorical quirks of your leaders, or the hyperlocal knowledge of your environment survive if they aren't deliberately coded into the machine? If we just leave it up to statistical probability, the nuances simply disappear.
And that leads to a complex, perhaps unsettling, thought experiment to take away from this analysis. Let us assume PSTU's Digital Prism project is entirely successful.
Okay, let's say it works perfectly.
They managed to architect an AI that perfectly understands the theatrical, emotional dramaturgy of a historical actor sovereign, and it perfectly grasps the planetary, holistic chronobiology of ancient folk medicine. How will that uniquely trained, culturally fluent system eventually interact with the world? When a machine engineered with that specific blend of cinematic timing and environmental intuition is eventually tasked with calculating solutions for the socioeconomic problems of the future, what kind of logic will it output?
A digital consciousness that governs with the dramatic flair of a sovereign actor and the holistic patience of an ancient physician. Now that is a truly fascinating architecture to imagine. Until next time, keep diving deep.